is Ghirardelli, and I'm part of the Solix Technologies team. And welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us on this webinar, where we have two distinguished speakers. One is Alex Nagappan, who is part of the information technology group at Ghirardelli Chocolates, and Alex is going to talk about how Ghirardelli has put together a comprehensive strategy as part of their holistic IT environment to address the issues of the data management. But before Alex sort of dives into those details, we also have another guest speaker who is Jinan Dash, and Jinan is one of the executive consultants in Silicon Valley. I also want to welcome Jinan Dash to this webinar, and thanks both Alex and Jinan for being our guest speakers. So Jinan, I think we'll start with you, and if you can help here to give your perspective on how the industry has sort of evolved, especially in the data management space, and what the issues are and so forth, and then we can have a real world example from Alex, how they have taken the concept and put it as part of the comprehensive strategy at Ghirardelli Chocolates.
Okay, Raghu, thank you. Good morning. And actually this is a good morning because I just saw Jeff Bezos from Amazon announced his Kindle Fire, which is a serious competition to iPad, at $199. This fits well into our discussion of the explosion of data. So before I get into that, let me just, most of you listening are probably younger than me, so let me just give you a quick 2-minute lesson on the evolution of database and data. So back in the 1960s, everything was files. When you say give me a customer number, it was byte number 14 to 21 in a stream of bytes. So the metadata was all embedded in the program, and there were a bunch of bits were formed into records. Then back in the 70s, we declared data as a central resource to be shared. So applications would orbit around the data, not the other way around. And the first generation DBMS came out. IBM came up with IMS, IDMS. Honeywell had IDS. So this was the beginning of the database. Then my friend Dr. Cord, no more with us, he's the father of the relational database. We worked together at IBM when we initiated this whole technology called relational database technology. And the decade of the 80s, we saw a tremendous impact in the economy to the programmer was tremendous. Instead of 14 pages of COBOL, you could write half a page and economize your coding. That was the economy to the programmer and the end user access. We saw a huge market growth. Then in the 90s, this was all good, but then unstructured data becomes the key. Very hard to represent a very complex engineering drawing into a two-dimensional rows and columns. So unstructured data started appearing as the internet emerged. New data types, high scalability. We started to see the beginnings of that in the 90s, but the next decade, the year 2000, we just saw a tremendous explosion. So what we are seeing right now is scalability unheard of. In my days of designing DB2 at IBM, 64 gigabytes was my design point, and I thought, who on earth would see that big a database? Now it's a joke right now. I mean, you can buy these little USB drives that is that big. They're terabyte USBs. So as we entered in the last decade, our millennium, we saw web scale data mining, collaboration, and now everybody is talking about two things. This whole big table or big data, and there is a whole group coming up called NoSQL that deals with the Hadoop and the MapReduce and the big table at Google. So we are talking about scalability that those of us who go back to the beginning have not seen. So what does it mean? Just to put that in context, let me remind you If you look at the right side, gigabyte, that is, 10 to the power 9, then terabyte 12, petabyte 15, exabyte 18, 10 to the power 18. And look at the economics. 10 years ago, 1 petabyte was $2 million. Coming next year, that will be $2,000. I mean, that's real Moore's law in storage. So we'll see the emails, the PDF, PowerPoint, all this stuff, 1 to 10 gigabytes. I mean, I just saw that Jeff Bezos announced this morning in New York City that 18 million digital books, movies, all that stuff will be available on this little Kindle Fire, which is the iPad competition, from the cloud. And you see, once you get into MPEG, JPEG, all the movie stuff, you are getting into big numbers. 1 terabyte voice, video, all this is happening. Video can drive these numbers huge. So the petabyte, personal petabyte, is affordable in a year or so. But we need tools to capture, manage, organize, search, display, all these things. I mean, numbers are exciting, but they're also a huge big part. How do you manage this? How do you deal with this? Now let's come down to the earth and look at our world of database. The business data is still primarily managed by relational database. And here you see the range. Here we talk about 10 to 100 terabytes. I mean, the largest database, data warehouse is at Walmart, is about 150 terabytes. We always talk about that. So 10,000 disks plus 18 gigabyte each, when you cook it up, it's 100 terabytes. Mostly data, this is put on data warehouse, some media managers, but unstructured data is all mostly in files. When you look at emails, you look at voice, you look at video, you look at audio, all that stuff is sitting on files. Now, how do they coexist? If you go to the next slide, you'll see that the database, you look at two scenarios. The interactive file system, DB2 leaves the files, unstructured data in the file, and they provide referential integrity between the database and the file system. Oracle tries to consolidate them. So at least some advantages, one security model, one space manager, recovery, application, all that. So, but the intent is the same. You have one manager managing both kinds of data. But this may not be adequate, so it's a different discussion. Maybe another time we'll talk about big data and the challenges. So, but here we are talking about business relevant data managed by relational databases. Okay, so what happens here now? This exclusive database growth is happening both inside relational database world and outside. You buy a company, suddenly your data volume grows. And this internet commerce, ERP, all these things are nothing but the volume of data is going on. Then you have, nobody wants to delete anything, everybody is concerned about compliance, about auditing, about all the regulations. So healthcare has HIPAA, financial has all these new compliance rules. So you have a data multiplier effect. Data keeps accumulating. And annual compound growth rate for databases is exceeding 125%. And we are starting to see that every place. And you'll see the example when Alex talks about Ghirardelli and Civic, everybody is sort of going here. Now the question you may ask is, so what? What happens when there is tremendous amount of growth of data? The more this data volume grows, very simple, the performance is impacted. Accessing that same data from a much larger database takes more time. So you start doing performance tuning, you do all kinds of tricks to minimize the path length. You can do on SQL tuning, database tuning, but there are limits to how you can deal with that. Somebody is flashing, he cannot hear me. So can one of you indicate the audio, please? So it not only the performance degrades, but storage cost also increases. And the backup recovery, everything takes longer. And unless you think through this, these things one day will blow up in your face. And then you have to sort of scramble to figure out what to do then. So right now the industry is advising everyone to start thinking about a life cycle. Think about how data volume is growing, what can you do about it, how do you manage it. And this is very, very important for every enterprise to put a plan in place. It's called ILM, some people Information Lifecycle Management. We are specifically talking about data and of course by default applications also. So let me give you an example. Go to the next slide, please. If you see here, you see here your hardware capacity is shown by the purple line. Then the performance as the data volume grows, load factors grow, the performance starts degrading. So what do? You start adding hardware. So, you keep adding hardware. Raghu, can you click? It's right. As you go through the hardware capacity increase, you increase the performance, then it degrades again, add more hardware, degrades again, add more hardware. So as you can see, your hardware capacity goes on increasing and increasing. In the process, database is growing, IT resource cost is growing, which means, your total cost of ownership goes up, compliance dollars, downtime, risk. So, this is the classical problem. This is just one copy. Now suppose you have to have a copy for testing, QA and all that, these things just multiply. So if we go to the next slide, just to give you an example, you have a database of 200 gigabytes, a production database, and this is actual example of a customer. You need backup, you need another copy for disaster recovery, testing, development, quality control. So here suddenly your 200 gigabytes becomes 1.2 terabytes. I mean, this can be, we have example after example at Solix where this has become such a burden that we have another offering that deals with this test data management to minimize this number and reduce the cost drastically. Sometimes it can be into the millions of dollars. So that's the other issue is not only performance, not only, but then there is this duplication. So let me quickly just give you a very, very fast overview of the thought process here. Enterprise data management solutions or system is what Solix calls the platform. So one aspect of that, not the only aspect, one aspect of that is looking at the life cycle of data. So if you look from the left side, you have production databases sitting on Oracle JD Edwards. In this example, you'll hear after me is the production database at Ghirardelli JD Edwards. Then you have got PeopleSoft, Siebel, BAN, custom applications. So that's your world of production. This is how the business hums every day. So that we call active data tier 1, and you like to keep that for 0 to 2 years depending on the nature of your business. Then 2 to 7 years, we found that most of this data becomes semi-active. Maybe 10% of the data is accessed, 90%. So you can choose to move it to tier 2. And into a more economic storage device, and that semi-active data we call it tier 2, and then beyond 7 years it becomes inactive data, but you can't throw it away. You want to move it to another layer. So it could be cloud, as you saw a picture there, cloud. It could be in a different type of inexpensive devices. But most important thing here is not just pushing data out over time, but to be able to access data no matter where it is. So on the rightmost side of the chart, you see reporting BI tools. Certainly there is a reason for the compliance group from the government to look at data that is 10 years old. So we should be able to quickly access and search this data no matter where it is sitting. So it's not as trivial as it may sound. And you will hear it more clearly when we talk through how Ghirardelli has been dealing with this issue. But I think you get an appreciation of this whole life cycle of data management at the enterprise. But again, to conclude the total solution offering from Solix, what you see in this picture is what I just talked about is the top left corner, database archiving. There is on the right side, there is top right side, there is the whole area of applications getting aged, old. You merge two companies and there are two different type of commercial applications. One uses SAP, one uses Oracle, and somebody says I want to standardize everything on Oracle. Then how do you retire the old applications? There are custom applications. So there is a whole area there that needs to be thought through. So they are kind of related to the ILM. And in the bottom, we talk about managing the safe data, the data copies, handling all that, and then this notion of data masking. All of that is governed in the center by this circle, data governance. You got to have policies, you got to have UI for specifying the stuff, for the user. And all of this could be a precursor to cloud enablement. You cannot just switch into cloud. You have to address these issues, in any way. So this is the essence of what Solix's business is. Let me summarize. Data is the currency of the digital age. This is the oxygen. It's been more fundamental, more important than 10 years, 20 years ago. And this tremendous growth we talked about. And this causing all kinds of performance issues and cost issues. So you need to outline this policy and how do you deal with archival to disposal to retirement. This is the whole issue is addressing that point. So with this, let me and again just this is what you can be thinking of cloud deployment, but none of that will happen until you address the basic issues. So let me hand over to Alex now, and he can take you into a specific case as to how they dealt with this issue.
Yeah. Before we start, just my apologies up front. Occasionally you might hear a loud noise or something like that because they are doing some construction work. Unfortunately, they didn't tell me that it was going to start today. So when that happens, I'll just mute, and it only takes a couple of seconds, and I'll unmute. I'm here with Ray Trinidad. Ray Trinidad is our resident JDE developer. He's from the Denver campus, and we've had him, fortunate enough to have him for the past 7 years, and he has been tremendous help in the archiving solution that we picked and the configuration part of it. Now, as you would know, a brief introduction, Ghirardelli was founded by Domingo Ghirardelli back in 1852. So we, one of the longest running chocolate company in the United States. There's more history that you can find on our website. I don't want to bog you down with the history of Ghirardelli. There are about 1,000+ employees in all of Ghirardelli. That includes the manufacturing, the corporate, the sales, and also the retail locations we have nationwide. And Ghirardelli is the leader in premium chocolate market. Our signature product is the chocolate caramel filled squares. That's what we call our hero product too. How many of you have had Ghirardelli chocolate? Let me ask that.
Who hasn't?
Who haven't? Okay, that's a good answer. I like that. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, just to give you a inside view into our application environment, we are on JD Edwards Enterprise 1 version 9. We are on Tools Release 89842. We have 3 environments, which is the development, testing, and production. And our database and application are both in Unicode. We are using SQL Server in a cluster environment, and JD Edwards database runs on one of the instances we created. Currently, we have 2 web servers and 2 application servers. One application server is actually a physical server, and the other application server is a virtual machine. The 2 web servers are virtual machines as well. And we have approximately about 150 users. Next slide, please. Now, we've had positive growth, and since 2008, and we continue to do so. And most people will ask us, how do you survive the economy downturn and all that? One thing nice about chocolate is that if you get addicted to it, you always got to have it. And also, especially if you are in a premium chocolate market, we are fortunate enough to realize that we are not greatly affected by the consumption of chocolate in the premium market. So those are, saving graces for us during the economy downturn. We have also introduced a lot of new products. Some of it is the sea salt, drop chocolate with sea salt is one of our new products, and it's gaining a lot of popularity. We are also into the baking section as well. Now, we continue to gain market share in the premium chocolate market, and also we have expanded our retail division by adding new locations. In fact, we have 2 more locations coming up the middle of October. And we are also expanding in the current market by adding more SKUs and more customers. So that has given Ghirardelli a lot of growth, especially in the last 3 years, going back 3 years. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, we implemented JD Edwards back in 2001 when it was XE, and we completed implementation in 4 months, and we went live on July 1st. JD Edwards was also very surprised that we could do it in about 4.5 months. And so we were written up, and they became a very good partner with us, and we became a reference client for JD Edwards at that time. Now, in our case, we didn't understand JD Edwards. We went from a legacy system, which is called Macola, and we decided to go to JD Edwards. Now, we didn't know anything about it. We didn't know anything about the structure, the database growth, and all that. So we had data in there going back to 2001. And in 2006, after Oracle's purchase of PeopleSoft and all that, they told us that XE is not going to be around much longer, and we had to upgrade to 8.10. So that's what we did. And later, when Oracle did complete the purchase of PeopleSoft, they came back and said they'll support XE till the year 2013, I believe. But we were already on 8.10. And the reason why we chose 8.10 is because it gave us the option to do both chat client and a web client. So we have been collecting data since 2001, and by 2006, we were already close to 1.2 terabytes of disk space between the two. And we also realized that the backup routines were taking much longer. It was also slowing down the system, and we didn't really have that much of a luxury in the sense of time as to when we can start the database backup and when it has to end by, because we are a 24/7 operation here at Ghirardelli. And not to mention the cost as well. Next slide, please. Now, this large data files, we realized that was starting to put a stress on our system. Back then, we only had one SQL server with multiple disk arrays to accommodate the databases, and it was also our application server. When we realized that performance was becoming a hindrance to productivity, we decided that we will split the application server by running all UBs on a logic server. That helped us some, but never addressed the amount of disk space that was being consumed by the continual growth of the data. And whenever we do a refresh of the data from production to CRP and also to DB, we realize that we are chewing up more space, and not just in one environment, but in all 3 environments now. And we do constant refresh of the data in development and also in PY. So we kept an eye on the data shrinkage, and we realized that as fast as our data is growing, our disk space was shrinking. Now they always say that it's easy to add more disk space because hardware is cheap. Now hardware is cheap, yes, but you also have to factor in the space that you have in your server closet, in your server rooms, and server cabinets. As you keep adding more disk array and adding more servers, you're running short on real estate, if you will. Okay. Next slide, please. Now, in alternative considerations, we did a lot of different things. We went through different architecturally design phases to find out what we can do to help solve this problem. Now, we considered installing a separate SQL server back then with a failover capability to reduce some of the stress on the application server, the logic server, and also if we took the database server out of the enterprise server, we could grow it by adding more disk space to that. And we also considered about pruning the database, delete the records that were not pertinent to the business anymore. And we did not have the option to purge since we didn't have an archiving solution that we can go back to if the data is needed once it's purged. So we were in a dilemma, and we started looking for different alternatives as to what we can do in terms of shrinking the database yet preserving the old data, because we weren't that comfortable in getting rid of it just yet. Next slide, please. So we did go ahead and install the SQL cluster, and that helped us a little by addressing the size of the database and the storage. Now, we left the enterprise and the logic service to do what they were intended for, and that addressed the, like I said, it addressed the space issue on the enterprise server, but it did not address the size of the database. So whatever problems we had in terms of storage and backup and trying to take the tapes offsite and all that became very expensive over time, and it still wasn't addressing the primary issue that we had, which is the size of the database. Next slide, please. So, we know that J.D. Edwards didn't truly have a very good archive and purge system. So what we did was we started looking for a third-party solution, and we needed something that would work for us in a way that we wanted to, where we can park the data somewhere else and get back to it, in a seamless fashion. And we also were looking for something that we can get to the archived data through the same interface as opposed to logging into a different system or a different BI tool to get to the data that's already been archived. And we also needed someone or a system that seamlessly or transparent to the end user, where it knows exactly what data and what table that it needs to purge from. And so we looked at a lot of different vendors, and not many out there that truly understood the inner working relationship of the databases and the applications. And we even looked at IBM, and they didn't quite have the solution that we were looking for in terms of ease of use and using LDAP to get into our Active Directory and all that. Next slide, please. So, archiving was the precise tool that we needed to attain a manageable size and also reduce the backup time. And the costs associated with large data sets also seemed to go away with archiving. And after we did the archiving, we were able to shrink our database from 500 gigabits in one environment down to 280. And we did that by archiving and then purging the data from the JDE production. So we got rid of, we archived the data from 2001 through 2006. And in 2012, we will start work on data that's from 2007. So we keep about 3 years of history and plus current. Now with the smaller databases, we also found that the seek time for queries is so much faster, and it also increased the user productivity. Now you would ask, how did we benchmark it? We went and actually asked our end users about the system performance, not telling them that we had archived our data because we didn't want that to be influenced. So we would just walk around and ask the heavy users, and also in our production area, and they're saying that it seems to be a little faster than it did before. I don't know what you guys did, but that's good for us. So we knew that archiving and purging data from a production database actually did help with the productivity of our end users. Next slide, please. Now, we were looking for a vendor or a partner that has strong knowledge of JDE, the data tables, and also the relationship between all of them. And we also needed someone who can fill configuration sets because we didn't want to sit there and figure out, okay, if I'm purging out of the FO911 table, what other relational tables do I have to archive? In what order? Does this matter? And because there are a lot of things that's involved in just moving data from production and parking it somewhere else. So we needed someone who understood that and can walk us through the steps and also help us build this configuration set. And we were also looking for an application that intuitively will know if the structure of a table has changed, either by applying an ESU, ASU, or by going from one version to another. And that was important to us because we didn't want to sit there and do data comparison between tables and find out, okay, has the new table been added, more columns have been added to an existing table. The schema pretty much is what we're getting at. So we didn't want to have to worry about those kind of things, and once again, be very seamless for us in IT.
We've lost the presentation display.
Raghu?
Yes, so I think Alex, can you see that?
Yeah, I can still see.
Oh, okay. Yes, I'm not sure, maybe you can try and reconnect to the WebEx, but I think we actually send us slides as well after the session, and I think we're pretty much into the last part of it, and I have a few questions that have come on the chat line. So Alex, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Now, after we implemented the archiving solution and we started looking at the progress, and what we have really learned is that it is not only healthy to maintain a growing database by archiving, but it added some benefits like shorter backup time, less disk usage, improved system performance, and user productivity. All that eventually ends up in reducing the cost for the IT department. And so now we don't have to worry about adding more disk space to a growing database. In fact, we were able to recover a lot of white space, and also we realized that the performance, the database, it's a whole lot better than it was a few years ago. Now, we also realized that by doing this, we don't really have to start pruning the database or start doing tune-ups of the SQL Server and all that, because this pretty much addresses all that maintenance thing that not necessarily goes away, but you don't have to do it that frequently. Next slide, please. Now, deciding on what data to archive needs a lot of planning, and we needed a partner that can walk us through this whole process and help us maintain it from time to time. We also gained a better understanding of the application, the architecture, and relationships between the database, the applications, and the functionality of the ERP system by implementing this database archiving system. And so not only did we manage our database growth, but we also learned and also had a better understanding of how our ERP works. Now, how to view the data that has been archived, the current data, was something that came up during our discussions with the different groups that use the ERP system, and they all pretty much agreed that we should be in the same user interface or the same GUI that we see right now when we log into JDE to be able to get to our merged data and archive data. Next slide, please. Now, what I would recommend if you are considering to archive your data, it's not just IT driven. It brings a cross-functional collaboration between the departments, and there are long-term data needs because different departments would have different time limits. Like finance would probably want to keep it for 7 years. HR would probably want to keep it forever. In production, they probably want to keep it for 1 year, 3 years, depending on what they want to do, look at the inventory movement and all that. Marketing, obviously, they want it for as long as they can have the data saved. So that gave us a better understanding. Now, when you're choosing a vendor, some of the things that you really want to consider is their experience, their working knowledge of the JD Edwards, their resources in collaboration with your resources, and also the kind of support that you would get. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. Now, after implementing the Solix database archiving solution, we noticed the following. The production database shrank from 480 to 260. That includes us going to Unicode. The database for all three environments, from 1.4 tera came to under 1 tera. We did not see the need to carve out more LUN because we introduced the SAN system when we introduced the SQL Server cluster environment, so that we could just throw more disk space, if you will, to a growing database. But now we didn't really need to do that. And we also reduced that the backup time has gone down from what was about 5 to 6 hours now to under 2 hours. What we do is 2 stages. We do disk to disk and then disk to tape. And also the search time on queries running large UVEs have improved on the performance and everything else. Now, before we go to the question and answers, I just wanted to have Ray briefly mention on the configuration sets when he is running the archiving process for sales orders, for the finance, and and also for distribution. How easy it is to use those configuration sets that Solix actually built for us. Ray?
Hi, I already said that I'm the one assigned to my responsibility is to purge our data from those previous years, and then it seems I like the solution very much because it's date driven, and then it has all the configuration sets defined as what tables it's archiving the relating tables for the sales order, so it's all defined on the configuration. And the rule of thumb is if you want to archive using this solution, you just need to start small, not archive 1 year. You have to start like 1 month just for testing, and then make sure it archives correctly by doing your SQL, making sure it's not in the production database already, and then also testing it under archive environment just to make sure the data has been purged in production, and then it's archived in their archive environment. And for me, it was not. It didn't take long to be an expert in archiving, as long as you really just do your testing and make sure you run reports also, which is very important, like especially in the finance group. So we need to make sure the financial report looks the same as from the archive one. So what we do was we run financial reports from all those years from production, and then when we did our archiving process, we make sure we went to the archive environment and then ran the same report, and making sure it matches the financial reports, which is one of the very important thing the solution took care of. And other than that, it really makes my life easier to do programming, making sure it's quick to develop reports because of a smaller database set, and it's just about maintaining data, making sure there's not excess data in production, which performance-wise will help your enterprise run smoothly.
And one other thing I would like to add, thanks Ray, one other thing I would like to add is that when you archive the data, there might be a time when you need that data back in production for some reason. Now we tested that process as well, data that was taken out of production, when we were doing the testing, we took the data out of the test environment, and then we decided to put that data back. And I'm happy to report that the system did not fail us. So basically, whatever we archived, we were able to do the reversal of it and put that data back into the test environment and run reports, and everything came out just like it should. Okay, with that, I hand it over to Raghu. And
yeah, thank you so much, Alex and Ray, for all the detailed insight on how you sort of put together a sort of a comprehensive strategy from the sort of the implementation of the JDE, and then how the strategy has sort of addressed the issues of data growth and so forth. So I think we have a few minutes here. So I have a few questions that I got on chat line. Maybe we can go over them first and then open up the questions for the people on the line. So one of the first questions, I think, is a mixture of a little bit on the product side as well as the more on the strategy side. The first one is the question was, you mentioned the transparency to the end user. So does it actually mean that the users have simultaneous access both to the production data as well as archive data from the JDE native application?
Yes, they do. So what happens is that Solix, when they archive our data, they create two other environments. One is called the archive environment, and one is called the merge environment. Now, we decided to keep the same naming convention, so instead of PV A10, when we were in A10 at that time, we called it archive A10, like AR A10 and MG A10 for merge data. So this is how it works. So let's say you archive your data, prior to 2007. That's what we did in our case. So if someone wants to go back to data that touches briefly on 2007, and then everything else is sitting in the production, they just log into the merge environment, and they can run reports with a date span of 2007, like January 2007 through January 2008. So the merge environment knows that 2007 data is sitting somewhere else, and 2008 data is in the production environment. So it touches data from both places and puts it on the screen. So you log into a merge environment to get the production and archive. So if you want to run solely just for an archive data, you're not concerned about what's in production right now, you log into an archive environment. So in this case, we called it ARA10. And in ARA10, you can run any report you want that has been archived. So it doesn't even touch the production data. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think fundamentally, yes. I think there is a simultaneous access from the native application, and I think that's what you have done. So the second question is more towards like the JD Edwards. So the looks like by archiving the data, you have addressed the issue of carving out the production database into a smaller set, and that helped on backup and so forth. But does the same archiving strategy also help on JD upgrades? So for example, if I'm moving from 8.x to 9.0 with a smaller data sets in my production, would it also help my JD upgrades as well?
That's a very good question. Ray, correct me if I'm wrong. What we did was we knew we were going to go to version 9 from 8.10, and we knew that this is the year we were going to do that. And so after talking to all the other different departments, we decided that we'll take the old data out so that we can have a smaller data set to do the migration. And Ray, our experience was a lot faster, wasn't it, with a smaller data set?
Mm-hmm. And then what Solix does is they have their own JD Edwards team, I think, that knows what fields added to the table, and then they just need to do some changes to our archiving to add those additional table on the archive merge environment.
Cool. Thanks for that. So the next question I have is more on the report. So it looks like you have the users have experienced or your users have experienced the the speed of queries and so forth. But how about the reports processing time? Now that you have a smaller subsets of the data, and if you are only accessing production, are the reports processing much faster? For example, the quarterly reports and so forth.
Yeah, Ray was looking at me, I was looking at him as who was going to answer. The answer is yes. We have certain reports, like one is called the cost roll-up. Previously, we would start it, on a weekend, like early on Saturday, and we'll be lucky if it's done by middle, of Sunday. So it literally took over a day to do the cost roll-up reports and all that. But now they can just fire it up in the middle of the day, and it's usually done in 4 to 5 hours. That's one of the biggest things that we've noticed. The other thing we've also noticed is on the work order completion as well, the reporting of the work order completion. Before, when they report production, it could take anywhere up to about 30 seconds for it to bring something back on the screen, but now it takes them under 10 seconds.
Okay. So I think one last question I think I got on the chat window, and then we'll just open up the forum. For now that you have created this database archiving, does it with Solix in your case? So does it require? How about the management of the Solix database archiving system? Does it require a full-time person, or or is it basically like it's a smaller portion of your workload?
For me, because I'm the only developer here, so I have a lot of hats to do. So I usually schedule it on the weekend, but actually you could do archiving when there are anytime, as long as the operation is not so large. So our rule of thumb, we usually communicate with production because we're a 24-hour shop. So, and then we communicate to the shop production that we need this 2 days weekend to do archiving, so that it will make also archiving faster. Because if you do archiving during the live periods, then it will slow down the archive process, and it will also affect production time.
Yeah, in our case, we did this in collaboration with our sister company in Stratham, New Jersey. They also are on JD Edwards, and so instead of having two solid solutions, we decided to have one solid solution that would address both companies. So as a matter of fact, when we do archiving, our data is actually being taken out of our JD production and parked into the archive database, which is on the other side of the continent. And we have had no issues with it at all. So basically, you don't need a full-time person to manage the archiving solution. If you have a DBA, the DBA can do that, or if you have a CNC for your JD Edwards, the CNC can do that, or you can share the load. So you don't require it. So basically, what I'm trying to say is, if you install this solution for archiving, you don't need to hire another body.
Okay. Thanks, Alex, for that. Actually, I just got one more question on the chat. The question here was more like, I think for Alex, for you, like, so any tips or recommendations on how to sort of establish an ROI or present the business case to the exec management on this IT strategy of archiving, on why it can be very useful. So fundamentally the question is like, how do we make a case, how do you make a case to the execs?
Yeah. the ROI is not just measured in dollars. There are other intangible things to consider as well. Like our learning experience was that we understood the application, the ERP, a whole lot better. Ray, as our developer, understood the inner workings of the different tables, how they come into play when you start, writing up a new application or modifying an existing application and all that. Now, that's the intangible part. Now, another intangible part is that the productivity of our end users definitely went up. In terms of production and everything, we saw an improvement there. In terms of people just sitting there waiting for the report to finish, they'll just run the report and it finishes a whole lot faster, and then they continue with that instead of just sitting there and saying that, my machine is tied up because they were, running something locally back then, but now there's no option to run your UVs local. Now, in terms of financial ROI, tapes are not cheap. Our tapes, they cost anywhere between $200 to $300 a piece. Now, when your database is in the gigabytes, you are purchasing a whole lot more tapes. You have to manage the backup system. That's time consuming. And since we are a 24-hour operation, there isn't really a good window to put stress on the system. So we decided that, the graveyard shift that comes in at 10 o'clock and, works throughout the night, it is in a, not as heavy capacity as the day shift. So we have an understanding with production saying that, do expect the system to be a little slow because there's going to be a lot of stress in it. And that's how we worked it. But now it's a non-issue. Now we can start the database back up at 7 o'clock and it's done, the D to D is done in under 2 hours.
Okay. Good. Thanks, Alex, for that. I think that's very a lot of insight into that whole process. So I think we have a minute or so. I just wanted to now see if anyone on any of the callers have any specific questions for Alex. So if not, I think thank you, Alex, and thanks to your team for spending time with us and providing insight on how database archiving and information lifecycle management strategy has helped Ghirardelli Chocolates on the IT side to improvise and optimize the systems and so forth. And thanks to Jinan as well, who has helped to set the stage on how the industry has evolved, the key problems of the data management and so forth. And thank you all for